I own you, but I'll never love you, the Mafia boss whispered on their wedding night, until everything changed. A true story. Nobody tells you what it feels like to marry a stranger. They never mention the silence in the car on the way there, or how you keep your hands folded in your lap because you don't know what else to do with them. Nobody talks about how you look out the window at ordinary people walking on ordinary streets and think, that used to be me, that used to be my life. That was exactly how Natasha felt on the evening of her wedding. She was 23 years old. She had not chosen the dress. She had not chosen the venue. She had not chosen the man. His name was Alexei. He was 31, broad-shouldered, dark-eyed, and he carried himself the way men do when they've spent their whole lives never being told no. He ran the most powerful criminal organization in the city. Everyone knew his name. Nobody said it too loudly. The reason Natasha was sitting in that car, in that dress, going to that wedding, was simple. Her father owed Alexei a debt, a large one, the kind that doesn't get paid back with money. Alexei had come to their home one afternoon, sat across from her father at the kitchen table, and laid out two choices: the debt, or his daughter's hand in marriage. Her father's hands had shaken so badly he could barely hold his tea. Natasha had been standing in the doorway the whole time. She had heard every word. She walked in, sat down, and said, "Fine, I'll do it." Her father started to cry. She didn't. The ceremony was small, a private room above a restaurant that had no sign on the door. A dozen men in suits, a priest who didn't make eye contact with anyone, and when it was done, when the last person had filed out and the door had closed behind them, Alexei poured 2 glasses of vodka, pushed one across the table toward her, and said the words she would remember for the rest of her life. "I want to be honest with you. You are my wife now. I will keep you safe. I will give you everything you need, but I will never love you. I don't think I'm capable of it anymore. I just want you to know that, so you don't spend your time waiting for something that isn't coming." He said it the same way you'd read out a legal document. No cruelty in it. No apology either. Just the facts, as he saw them. Natasha picked up her glass. "Thank you for being honest," she said. She drank. He watched her. Neither of them spoke again that night. The house she was brought to was enormous. She had her own wing, her own bedroom, her own sitting room. There were staff who cooked her meals and drove her wherever she needed to go, as long as where she needed to go had been approved first. She could not leave on her own. Her phone was monitored. Her mail was opened before it reached her. She was, in every practical sense, a prisoner who lived in a very beautiful cage. Alexei was rarely home. When he was polite. He asked if she was comfortable. He asked if she needed anything. He did not ask how she was feeling. He did not ask what she thought about things. He treated her the way you treat a guest you're obligated to host but didn't particularly invite. Natasha spent the first few months just trying to survive the boredom. She read. She walked the grounds. She planted things in a small patch of garden on the east terrace that nobody else was using. She wrote letters to her father that she knew were being read by someone else first. And she watched Alexei, not because she was falling for him. She was far too practical for that. She watched him the way you watch a locked box, wondering what's inside. The answer came by accident, the way most important things do. 4 months into the marriage, Natasha got lost looking for the laundry room and ended up in the east corridor of the 3rd floor. The housekeeper had left a key in the wrong drawer. There was a door. She opened it. Books. Floor to ceiling. Wall to wall. Dostoevsky. Rilke. Neruda. Pablo Neruda. Which was not what she expected to find in a crime lord's secret room. Every book had handwriting in the margins. His handwriting. She recognized it from papers she'd seen on the hallway table. On the shelf at eye level, there was a framed photograph. A little boy, maybe 7 years old, holding a toy soldier, standing next to a tall man who had Alexei's same eyes, Alexei's same jaw. Someone had written under it in pencil, "The last day I was a son." Natasha stood in that room for a long time. When she finally left, she put the key back exactly where she'd found it. She didn't tell anyone. She didn't even write about it in her journal. But something had changed, very quietly, the way seasons change, where you don't notice it happening until one morning you look outside and realize it's different now. The second thing that changed her mind about Alexei happened about a month later. A late frost came overnight and killed everything in her little garden. Every plant she'd been tending for weeks, gone. She went out in the morning and just stood there looking at it. She wasn't crying. She was past crying by then. She was just standing there. Alexei came through on his way to a car that was waiting for him. He stopped when he saw her. He looked at the garden. He looked at her. He didn't say anything. He just continued to his meeting. By the end of that same week, 3 of his staff had replanted the entire garden. Better soil this time. They built a small glass frame over it to protect it from wind. It was twice the size it had been before. He never mentioned it. Not once. She never thanked him. They both understood, somehow, that words would have ruined it. The real turning point came in the 13th month. Alexei was hosting a dinner. Business. The kind she wasn't introduced at. Natasha sat at the far end of the table and watched men talk in low voices and pretend she wasn't there. She was used to it by then. Halfway through the evening, there was a commotion outside. Then the windows shattered. Then there were gunshots. Every bodyguard in the room moved immediately, toward Alexei. That was their job. Protect him first, always. But Natasha moved toward the young man who served their table. A boy, really, maybe 18, who had been thrown sideways by the blast and was sitting on the floor with glass in his arm, shaking and pale. She got down next to him. She pulled off the sash of her evening dress and pressed it hard against the wound. She talked to him in a low, steady voice. She told him he was going to be fine. She told him to look at her, not at his arm. She held on. When Alexei found her 20 minutes later, she was still on the kitchen floor, still holding pressure on the boy's arm, still talking to him. He crouched down beside her. He was unhurt. He looked at her for a long moment and said quietly, "You didn't run. Neither did you," she said. "You never do." He had no response to that. He stood up, arranged for the boy to be taken to a doctor, and didn't come home until nearly dawn. But when he didn't go to his side of the house. He sat in the kitchen, in the dark, for a while. Natasha knew because she heard him. She stayed in her room. Some things you leave alone. After that night, things shifted. Not dramatically. Not in any way that would make a good scene in a movie. Just quietly, steadily, the way a river changes course over time. Alexei started eating breakfast at the table instead of in his study. He asked her once, in passing, what she was reading. She told him. He didn't respond. But the next morning, there was a book on the side table near the kitchen, one of the Neruda volumes from the locked room on the 3rd floor. No note, no explanation. She read it in 2 days. When she brought it back, she slipped something inside it, a single folded piece of paper. A short piece of writing she'd done, something personal, something that had taken her 2 hours to decide to share. She left it at his study door and walked away fast, before she could change her mind. She never found out what he thought of it. He never said. But the book reappeared on the kitchen side table 3 days later, and when she opened it, her writing was still inside, and the edges of the paper had gone soft, the way paper does when it's been handled many times. Then came the day, everything nearly fell apart. A rival group sent a message. They had been watching Natasha. They knew her routine, her garden, the route she took when she walked the grounds in the evenings. The message was simple. Her safety for his cooperation on a business matter. Alexei had her moved to a safe house in another country within 24 hours. His most trusted man drove her. She had one bag. What Alexei did not expect was the phone call that came 2 days later. "I'm not staying here," Natasha said. Her voice was calm. It was always calm. That was the thing about her that kept catching him off guard. "I am not a piece of furniture you move around when it's inconvenient. If I'm in danger, I'll face it at home." There was a long pause on the line. Alexei was not a man who paused. He always knew what to say, always had the next move ready. "Please," he said. Just that word. Like it cost him something to say it. Like he had gone looking for a stronger word and come back empty-handed. Natasha stayed. But that single word stayed with her too, for a long time afterward. She was at the safe house for 6 weeks. He sent no personal messages. Only logistics. Updates from his men. Safety confirmations. Nothing that could be called feeling. What nobody told her was what was happening on his end. His staff later mentioned, quietly, that he had barely slept, that he had gone to her garden every morning, that he kept to himself more than usual, which was saying something. When she came back, he was in the main hall waiting. He dismissed everyone else. He told her the threat had been dealt with. He told her she was safe. He told her, almost as an afterthought, that he'd had her sitting room repainted while she was gone. She had once said, months ago, that the gray walls made her feel like it was always raining. She looked at him. "Alexei," she said, "when are you going to stop talking about walls and paint and gardens, and just say what you actually mean?" He looked at the floor for a moment, then at her. Then he said nothing, turned, and walked away. But he came back. He came back that same evening. He found her in the kitchen making tea, which she did when she couldn't sleep. He sat down across from her, and then, without her asking, without any particular warning, he started talking. He told her about his father, how his father had loved his mother completely, without reservation, the way most people are afraid to love, how he'd said it out loud every morning, and then how, on an ordinary Tuesday, his father had been shot at a dinner table by someone he thought was a friend. He said it twice that morning, Alexei said. I was 12. I counted. He said it at breakfast, and then again at the door when he left. He was looking at his hands. I decided that day that love was the most dangerous thing a man in my position could have. Because once someone knows you love something, they have you. Natasha wrapped her hands around her mug. She didn't reach for him. She didn't fill the silence with reassurances. So you decided, she said after a while, that if you never loved anything, you'd never lose anything. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The problem with that, she said quietly, is that it doesn't actually work. You still feel it. You just don't let yourself say it. And that's not strength, Alexei. That's just loneliness with better posture. He looked up at her then, and for just a second, without the composure, without the control, he looked like the 12-year-old boy who had watched his father die and decided never to let that happen again. It took time after that. It always takes time. People don't crack open overnight, especially people who have spent years building walls. But the walls started coming down, one small piece at a time. He started showing up where she was without a reason, just to be in the same room. She stopped leaving when he did. One evening he came to find her in the garden, which had grown into something quite beautiful by then, and he sat on the bench near the glass frame and just watched her work for a while. She handed him a trowel without saying anything. He took it. He had no idea what he was doing. She showed him, very patiently, without making a big deal of it. By the end of an hour, they had replanted 3 rows together, and neither of them had mentioned feelings once. That was the night something real began. Then came the moment that changed everything again. But this time, for good. It was about a year after the night in the kitchen. Alexei came to find her one morning, and set something on the table in front of her. A passport, her name, valid documents, the keys to an apartment in Prague. Your father's debt is cleared, he said. It's been cleared for a while, actually. You can go. There's nothing holding you here. Natasha looked at the passport. She looked at the keys. She looked at him. Why are you doing this now? She asked. Because, he said, and for once he looked almost uncertain. If you stay, I need it to mean something. I can't keep you here and call it a marriage. It isn't one. It was never one. He paused. I'd rather you leave than stay because you feel like you have to. Natasha picked up the passport. She stood up and walked to the window. Outside, her garden was in full bloom. It was spring, the first real spring she had actually watched arrive from beginning to end. She stood there looking at it for a long time. Then she put the passport in her coat pocket, turned around, and said, I'm not going to Prague. He waited. I'm staying, she said. But I want you to understand something. I'm not staying because I have nowhere to go. I'm not staying because I'm scared. I'm staying because somewhere between a secret room full of poetry and a rebuilt garden and a man who said please, like it was the hardest word he'd ever said, I made the mistake of actually falling in love with you. And I'm not particularly happy about it, if I'm being honest, because you made it very difficult. But there it is. Alexei stood very still. Then he crossed the room. He didn't say anything. He put his arms around her and held on. And it was not the way you hold someone you own. It was the way you hold someone you're terrified of losing. That was not the end of the story, of course. Real life doesn't have clean endings, they argued. He had trouble letting go of control. It was all he'd ever known. She had trouble asking for things. She'd been taking care of herself for too long. There were difficult months. There were silences that went on longer than they should have. But they came back to each other. Every time, they came back. Over the next few years, Alexei slowly, carefully, began stepping away from the organization. It was dangerous work. It took patience and strategy and, more than once, real fear. But he did it. He said later that he'd spent his whole life building something that had never made him happy, and it seemed like a waste to die protecting it. Natasha went back to school. Literature. She wrote and rewrote a piece about captivity and freedom that her professor kept sending back with the note, "This feels too personal." Let it breathe, she eventually did. They moved, in the end, to a small town by the sea, far from everything they'd come from. Their neighbors knew him as the quiet man with the remarkable garden. They knew her as the woman who ran the local reading group out of her living room on Thursday evenings. He still reads at 3 in the morning when he can't sleep. She used to stay in her own room during those hours, in a different life. Now she usually wanders in and sits with him, and they don't talk. They just exist in the same quiet space. And that is enough. Actually, it's more than enough. It's everything, he once told her, years later, on a night when the sea was loud and they were sitting on the back step with their tea, that he had known he was in trouble the morning he rebuilt her garden. Not when he decided to do it. The moment after, when he realized why he had. "And you still said you'd never love me," she said. "I know," he said. "I was wrong about a lot of things." She laughed. He smiled. A real one. Not the careful kind he used to wear like armor. This is a true story. The names have been changed, the feelings have not.